Hey everyone, it's Dr. Rick, and thank you for being patient. I've been away for a little while, but I'm back. And I wanted to do an unboxing on Naturello. Naturello is omega-3 fish oil. I did do one previously stressing the use of Viva brand, and I still love Viva brand, but this was also just recently released from Consumer Lab as an option, just in case you want something different. Both of these things work, Viva brand, and I'll put the link down below, and Naturello. I'll open these up in a second. But both of these, not these, but this one and Viva are both 1,000 milligrams of total omega-3 per capsule. That's high end. And it was approved by Consumer Labs. That's an independent organization that batch tests actually, certain brands over the counter, and they come up with if there's adulterants, if there's mercury, and I like the way they run their business. They also use a mass spec to evaluate. I think they're good. So regardless, I'll get to that in the end, but I wanted to show you a couple things. For those of you who follow the release of data, this was recently released from JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, and it talked about a meta-analysis looking at several different studies over the past couple of decades regarding LDL-associated diseases being controlled by statins. So essentially, does statin really reduce your cardiovascular mortality? And there was, if you look at the data, at least if you look at the results, there's a modest reduction in heart disease or all-cause mortality. Modest. Now, with all the talk of statins and the amount of money that's being put out, and everybody's being put on a statin if the cholesterol bumps up even a little bit, you would wonder, isn't there more data? And there isn't. So that was alarming to me. I knew that all the time. And that's why I use as much as possible lifestyle modification. Lifestyle modification is always going to be number one. But I'm not saying that statins are not useful for a certain subsect of the population, especially those with familial hypercholesterolemia, definitely. Because if you do have that, and you're not going to be able to check that with just a standard 4-panel cholesterol test, you have to do further testing. But if you do have FH, it's important you have that identified, your doctor finds it, and then you treat it aggressively. But not all of us have that. And I think what's happening is that as part of the screening process, everybody's getting a cholesterol once they hit 40 or once you hit a certain BMI. And if it's elevated, the bad cholesterol, the total cholesterol, then usually it's a suggestion, a soft suggestion. And if it's still elevated the next year, or if you're continuing to gain weight and you're not listening, then it's a hard suggestion and a suggestion to start a statin. That's because I think most of my colleagues don't have great training in nutrition or exercise or mindful practice. If we knew how to help people with lifestyle modifications, then I think that would be less use or less need for statins and probably less disease. But even with the advent of statins, in the last couple of decades, heart disease is still a number one killer, except for the last 2 years because COVID overtook it. So let me show you a couple other things. So I did mention that the absolute risk reduction was modest. And you have to know how to read these studies, especially meta-analysis. But if you look at the hierarchy of evidence-based medicine, meta-analysis is the top of the pyramid. Then you have randomized controlled trials and a couple others under those. So that's how doctors evaluate how to treat the population. But when we get into a room with a patient, the population data is important. Studies from pharmaceuticals are important, but it still comes down to individualizing treatment plans. So if you don't exercise, I'd start exercising. If you have limitations, then we work around the limitations. If you have eating preferences, then we educate. But within a 15-minute to 20-minute visit, it's hard to do that, especially if you're coming in and you have high blood pressure, if you also have a cramp in your toe, you also have toenail fungus, you're losing your hair, you can't sleep, you have reflux. It's hard to address all that when you have a daisy chain or a laundry list of different things. Before you know it, your visit is done, or you haven't had any blood tests yet, you go get the blood tests, and then all those discussions have to be made over the phone, where it's even a shorter visit. So I think that there's some definite problems with the way insurance-based medicine is run, but I think the fast answer is usually patch with a medicine. And hopefully it will work, but if you look at this information, or if you understand absolute relative risk, number needed to treat, confidence interval, you should understand that, because that's the way we read studies. That's the way we're supposed to interpret studies. But again, it still comes down to whoever's in the room with me. I have to pay attention to that person, or online, because that's the way I run my clinic, mostly online. I have to pay attention to that person. I have to personalize the treatment plan based on the nuances of what we extract out of our conversation. This was an old study. I honestly just took it because of the picture, but it is a relative study, but it's an old study from the Lancet in 2014, and it was out of Copenhagen by Borg Nordesgaard. And he did bring up back then information on the association between triglycerides and cardiovascular disease. Again, I like the pick. So here is your plasma and LDL remnants and chylomicrons. This is just how triglycerides and free fatty acids are carried from the stomach into the liver, through the bloodstream. And then this is the intima. This is the lining of the blood vessel. The problem is when you have triglycerides and LDL get into the intima and not back out, it stays in here. And if it stays in the intima, which is the wall of the blood vessel, sooner or later this guy, the macrophage, is going to find it. And when it finds it and it doesn't leave, it's going to turn into a foam cell. That is the beginning of a plaque. When you have the beginning of a plaque, it's almost like a snowball. When it starts and it continues to snow, you'll have a bigger and bigger and bigger snowball. Same thing with this plaque. It'll get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the likelihood is, if you started your problem here and you haven't changed your problem, which is lifestyle, eating, lack of exercise, high stress, poor sleep, alcohol, if you haven't changed it, it's only going to get bigger and worse. And the more that plaque grows and the foam cells develop, the narrower your blood vessel lumen becomes. Sooner or later, it goes down to 100% narrowed, and that's your heart attack or your stroke. So you really have to, I like the way he came up with the information. I like his picture, and I'm going to refer to him later on. So one of the problems I've found is that, not problems, but in the last, say, 5 years, the ketogenic or low carb community has really blossomed because it's a fast solution to losing weight, and it has worked. You have to be careful, and it is an arduous task because you have to measure everything, you have to track your macros, and it gets sometimes taxing, but it works. And a lot of people have tried it and they stayed on it. I've had only a handful of patients that have adopted to keto or low carbohydrate, high fat, and maintained it. But I will have most patients pulse for a short time. There's also paleo, there's also carnivore, there's still the tried and true vegan or vegetarian diet, plant-based diet, and there's gradations between that. But bottom line, and there's also fasting diets, which I'll talk about probably tomorrow, but there's different options. And for everybody, there's different availabilities, but it depends on you and depends on what you've tried, what you've failed with, and what you can develop with your resources. So one thing for sure, though, is that with the old way of measuring your risk with cholesterol, which is total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, which is sometimes referred to as bad, which it shouldn't be, HDL cholesterol, which is sometimes referred to as good, but nobody really measures or cares about it anymore, and then triglycerides, that's the old way. And that it's a calculated Friedwald equation is a calculated measurement. There's a more exact way, which is still considered experimental, which is ridiculous, but all my patients at my Herbal 411 clinic, they all get that one at least once. And when I get that and maybe an LP little a, and I'll put the video I did, the link for it, for LP little a and the fancy blood test down below. But when I get that once and we've proven the particle count, then I usually will give them a little break if it's not paid for, especially maybe the next time I get to 4, the standard ones, and I'll see if there's a dent, then I'll get the expensive one again. So sometimes insurance doesn't pay for that. But bottom line is that when you're on a ketogenic low carb diet, your your basic tests will not work right. They'll look very bad. In fact, you can be on a ketogenic diet for about a month and all your numbers will look like you're going to have a heart attack. And if your doctor doesn't understand, and this is from Frontiers in Medicine, 2020, April, and I think it just says that the standard lipid panel is not good enough. And let me show you. This is, let me show you the standard lipid panel. Standard lipid panel usually involves these. Let's just look at those there. That's a standard lipid panel. So total cholesterol, HDL, LDL, and triglycerides, okay? But this is all the rest of it. There's particle distribution, there's LP little a, there's this pattern, which is sometimes done on NMR, magnetic resonance imaging, or nuclear magnetic resonance, I probably screwed that up, but NMR testing, you can do it that way. That's by LabCorp. Quest, I like Quest's readout better. It's easier for me to read, but it doesn't matter. I'd say Quest or LabCorp, if you're allowed to go there, if we write the right diagnosis or ICD-9 code, you might get it paid for. So it's worth a try. Now this one did show, if you recognized it, a cholesterol, total cholesterol of 400 plus, and then an LDL of 321. That's crazy, but that's a ketogenic diet. Here's a more practical one. This is for a patient of mine. So his total cholesterol, 173, that's pretty decent. I like most of my folks, 200, as long as they don't have FH. LDL cholesterol, 104, pretty decent, right? And LP little a, 18, really nice. The only problem I see is that his LDL pattern is B. You can either be B or A. A safe, B, you got to work on something. So we got this. If I would have just got these, I would have said, hey, you're fine. But I did get everything else, and I say, well, there might be a little bit of a risk. And what I also get, which will lead me to this, these omega-3 oils, is I do a fat evaluation. So it doesn't really evaluate your fat. It just tells you how much omega-3 you have to your omega-6 ratio, whether you're high risk, moderate risk, or low risk. I think this is a great test. This is from Quest. LabCorp doesn't have the same thing, and that's why I like Quest a little better, but your insurance might not let you go there. And if they don't, you can always go to walkinlabs.com and order your own and pay for it out of your pocket. You can either pay for this out of your pocket or pay for the Cardio IQ from Quest out of your pocket. It's worth it at least once, and if you are going to get it, add the LP little a test to that, and at least if your doctor can interpret that for you, if your doctor can do a little bit of research, then great. You can at least find out if you're high risk or not, especially if you refuse to take a statin. And I don't blame you. If you want to try lifestyle modifications, diet, exercise, nutrition, sleep maximizing or optimizing first, I would do that first. Even fiber. If you wanted to even play around with being a vegan, that would be fine too. I played around with being a vegan for about 2 years. Then I switched 180 degrees over and did carnivore, and I did it the right way, and my cholesterol stayed exactly the same. HDL, LDL, total cholesterol, and triglycerides, exactly the same. But I had to really modify how I did that. And I might do another video on that later, or maybe I did a video already. But regardless, I think that there are valuable words of wisdom from all these camps that are experimenting, and especially the keto community. These guys are tired probably of listening to their doctors force statins down and scold them for having high cholesterols, yet most of them are athletes, the ones that I know, and they have low risk, but yet they're being told to get on a statin. And lo and behold, they change around a little bit of their diet, and they can manipulate. I've seen the keto guys manipulate their cholesterol, the standard cholesterol panel, within a week. They can be very well behaved, and then a week before, they can manipulate their panels or their diet and change the outcome of their panels. And that has proven the fact that Friedwald equation is probably not that great. Thus, the reason for the fancier test, more expensive test. This was from University of Sao Paulo in 2008. So these guys even knew back then that the value of triglycerides. So what am I getting at? I'm getting to the point where I think that if you're not going to be able to do the fancy cardio IQ because your doctor is not going to order it or refuses to order it. And I have had some cardiologists that will refuse to order it. I've had some primary carers that don't want to order it. And it's a shame, especially with HMO. Some of my patients can't afford extra testing, but I think that the triglyceride to HDL ratio, triglycerides to HDL ratio, is predictive. They even found it with back in 2008, is predictive of cardiovascular events. So if you can't afford the fancy cardio IQ, you can look at. I think that the triglyceride to HDL ratio is a pretty good proxy for the particle count. It's not as exact, but I think that elevated triglycerides will tell you that you're probably carbohydrate intolerant. I think if your HDLs are low, your triglycerides are high, it'll probably tell you that you're on your way to elevated risk factors. Let me get through the rest of these and I'll unbox this. But bottom line is that I think that when we have the potential for risk of a heart attack, a stroke, or what's called all-cause mortality, and trying to decrease all-cause mortality, any reason for death, if it just takes playing around with triglycerides, that's tangible. To me, that's tangible because it's easier to manipulate triglycerides than it is to manipulate LDL. And it's easier to keep triglycerides in check than LDL. So I think that if you maintain a really good nutrition practice, your triglycerides will stay low. High fiber, a good amount of omega-3, a low amount of omega-6, decreasing processed foods, cutting out sugar. Please cut out sugar. And then having exercise of some sort, whether you do cardiovascular fitness in the form of resistance or cardio, I don't care. Just get out and do something on a regular basis. And stress response. You have to control it. Even if you don't think you're stressed out, you have to have a practice of some sort. But I talk about that all the time. This is just another document. This is another document talking about women and elevation of triglycerides being associated with an increased chance of death. These are just a couple of, will be done in a second. This is again from Copenhagen, another demonstration that the true triglyceride level, the bad triglyceride level, is usually tested 2 hours after you eat. So let me explain that. And that's what Borg found, that triglycerides, especially if they're elevated, are irritative to the lining of the blood vessels, especially the coronaries. Now, when high triglycerides are irritating, imagine throwing salt in your eyes. That would be irritating. Imagine the same thing happening to the lining of the blood vessels. I think there was a study a long time ago, after eating a fatty meal or some kind of meat meal. This was an anti-meat campaign. Somebody showed the blood vessels spasming up within 30 minutes to 60 minutes. And that's fair. I don't know this. I don't remember the study. I just thought, oh, okay, that's fine. But imagine a high triglyceride level showering the lining of a very delicate lining of blood vessel. Now, you would think the blood vessel is like a pipe in, I'm pointing to the sink, pipe in a sink, but it's not. The blood vessel is one cell thick, but it's also hairy. It's hairy because it has to have an electric charge, and it has to have other components of glucose and protein, proteoglycans, to make it slippery so that it doesn't tear. Because you have a blood vessel that's one cell thick and you have a high pressure front going through with a pulse every second. Well, that's going to cause shearing. So you have to have a slimy lining, like the bottom of a pond. You have to have a slimy lining to protect that, and you do. And it was thought that one of the reasons for COVID causing so many blood clots is because COVID took away the glycocalyx, or the slimy lining. I think I did a video on this. If I didn't, sorry, I probably will. But the problem that sometimes happens would be if you expose your lining to a heavy amount of solute, like triglyceride. it will irritate the lining, and the lining will start to spasm, and that is where you'll have spasm. Now, in a capillaries don't really have muscle, so you can't really contract a capillary, but a big aorta or a coronary artery, especially a left main, you can go like that. And that's called, well, it's called a widowmaker, but when you don't want coronary arteries to spasm, because then everything after that spasm doesn't get oxygen and you die. So it's important not to do that, and not to eat stuff that will jack it up, like a cafe macchiato, whatever that sugary drink was. I just did a video on that. I think it's like 500 calories and 53 grams of sugar, which is godly terrible. Or is it 53 grams of carbs? It doesn't matter. 53 grams of anything bad is not good. And if you start your day off with that kind of liquid, don't do it. Please don't do it. But that's going to lead to a heart attack. If it doesn't kill you with the first sip, it'll kill you as you continue to be addicted to it. So this was finding in South Korea when they took people with findings on MRI that showed intracerebral atherosclerosis, and they went backwards and found, or did some research to find, did these people with narrowing of some of these arteries, did they have elevated triglycerides? And yes, they had elevated triglycerides. Now, is that causally related? Maybe not, but you can correlate it. I don't know if you can be the cause, but hey, lower the triglycerides, what the heck? So this was a study in 2017 that said that even if you do, so I'm going to give you a breath of fresh air. Even if you do have a problem with elevated triglyceride to HDL ratio and death is imminent, cardiovascular fitness can reverse that. It's worth it to exercise. Those of you who have your reasons for not exercising, fair. You don't have to exercise like me. I'm taking a group of 60-year-olds out hiking in Utah. I am so proud of this group. Now I have a couple of newbies that I have to keep eyes on, but I'm so damn proud of them. I also have a ex-Major League Baseball player that's going. He's probably going to lead me, but it's just so nice when people commit. And sometimes you have to have a bucket list activity to commit, and money involved to commit, and that's fine. I run excursions every year just for that fact. I have to do that too, otherwise I wouldn't commit. I've been on them solo by myself in the wilderness, but it's just nicer when you're with people. And when I see 60-year-olds, I can get out with my 30-year-olds and my 20-year-olds, and I can probably kick their butts. But when a 60-year-old comes out, I will honor that. If I can get a 70-year-old out with me hiking in a national park, that would be awesome. One of these days. So wait, I am having a 70-year-old. He's coming with me. I forgot. Bill's 70-year-old. He's the next firefighter. He's coming with me. He's actually going to help me just to make sure that everybody's safe on my trip. So anyway, I'll post it. If you don't if you are on Facebook, please look me up, Dr. Rick Hiking Excursions. I'll post everything that we encounter. It'll be a cool thing. I'm probably going to do a rim to rim Grand Canyon in August if you're interested. So, and last but not least, does lowering triglyceride help? And yes, it does. There are several studies that have been out. I just have to reference this. The Anchor study, the Marine study, the Jealous study, and there's something that's ongoing now called the Reduce It study. And it talked about how even with optimized LDLs, people will still have heart attacks. And it could be that the triglycerides, it used to be a popular thing to raise HDL and to lower triglycerides, then it fell out of favor for some reason. Maybe it didn't make a difference, or there was too many side effects from cholesterol, from triglyceride lowering medicines. But now it's starting to come back in, especially when we find that it doesn't help. The old information doesn't help. Statins are kind of modest at best. Why is everybody getting a statin if it's modest only? So check out that study in the beginning for absolute risk reduction, relative risk reduction, and the number needed to treat. You'll be really surprised. It's out of the JAMA in March 2022. So, bottom line, I know to get to a long story, get through a long story to this is the unboxing. This is Naturello. It was approved by Consumer Labs. You can see back here that, I think you can see it, but I can't read it. However, per one capsule, there's 1,000 milligrams of total omega-3. There's also other fish oils in here, but let me open it up for you. I think this cost me online. I can't find this anywhere except for Amazon, but it cost 20 bucks or so. So you will have to pay. If you're lucky enough, your insurance might cover some of the new stuff. There used to be Vasepa, and if you can get it pre-authorized, then your insurance will cover it for a year, I think. And the good thing about the synthetic omega-3s is that they don't come from fish, so you don't have to worry about mercury. So that's not bad. This actually looks like the synthetic ones. That is the cap. So it's not that big. That's how it looks. It looks kind of childish as far as the print up, but doesn't smell that bad. And anyway, even if you do take an omega-3 fish oil, please. The idea is the max dose of this. If you have a triglyceride issue, take 2 in the morning, 2 at night. Try to do it with food. But if you really have a bad issue, 2 in the morning, 2 at night, and 2 in the middle of the day. But you are going to burp this up. So my suggestion is you freeze it, meaning that you take this, you empty it into a Ziploc bag, zip the bag, put it in the freezer, keep this empty bottle on your counter so that when you lift the bottle in the morning, empty, go to your freezer. Because until you get used to it, if you put this in the freezer, you're not going to remember it, and you'll only take half the dose. Please, everybody does it. It's okay. I do it too. So that's why I keep the bottle over there and the bag over there, and I'm pointing to my desk and my fridge. So check it out. Check out my other video too. Between this and Viva brand, I found out, one of my patients found out if you order straight from Viva, the company, you can actually get a cheaper discount than Amazon. So thank you, Monica, for that. I'm not sure about Naturello, if you can order straight from company and get a discount, but those of you find, put it in the comments down below. If you guys have any comments about any of these studies, or if you have any questions about walk-in labs, or your experiences with statins or the new stuff, PCSK9s, let me know. If you've had any side effects from statins, don't fret. There's ways to do it, even every other day dosing or microdosing. There's red yeast rice. I've done videos on that too. I think it works great. I can lower cholesterol. I've done it. I can lower it. I've had patients lower it 30, 60 points. So it can be done without medicines, but for those of you who are high risk, or if you're familial hypercholesterolemia, don't take any chances. Get exercising, lose weight, build muscle, get some good sleep, change your life now, and hopefully we'll all live a long time. So thanks for watching up to this point, and don't forget to subscribe and share this with other people. Otherwise, I'll see you at the next video. Thanks.